I sat alone on the edge of my bed, staring at the folded flag from my husband's casket. The silence in the house was unbearable, the kind that presses on your chest until it's hard to breathe. After 26 years of marriage, I wasn't prepared for this kind of quiet. I had imagined growing old with him sitting on the porch drinking coffee, not whispering goodbye in a hospital room while machines kept time. The funeral had passed in a blur. Tight hugs, quiet condolences, people murmuring about how strong I was. But no one stayed. They returned to their lives and mine had come to a dead stop. I barely ate. I couldn't remember the last time I combed my hair. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for him, only to find the other side of the bed cold. My son Jacob tried calling every day from his university. I saw his name light up the screen but I couldn't answer. What was I supposed to say? That I didn't know how to be his mother anymore when half of me was missing? I kept hoping the phone would stop ringing so I wouldn't have to feel guilty for ignoring it. He'd text things like, "Love you, Mom," and "Please eat something." I'd read them, stare at the screen for a minute, then put the phone face down. Every room in the house reminded me of my husband. His jacket still hung by the door. His slippers were right where he'd left them. I couldn't bring myself to move them. I lived in a museum of memories, where touching anything felt like betrayal. The hardest part was dinner time. We always ate together, always. Now the clink of a single spoon against the bowl echoed like a scream. Most nights I didn't bother. I made tea, sat in silence and stared at the empty chair across the table. One afternoon, the rain tapped against the windows like fingers trying to pull me back to life. I sat on the couch with a photo album, tracing the edges of our wedding photo. My throat tightened but no tears came. I didn't have any left. I heard a knock. A single knock, then another. I froze. No one had visited in days. I wasn't expecting packages. Maybe Jacob had come home early? My heart fluttered with a strange mix of hope and anxiety. I stood slowly, walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't Jacob. It was Daniel, Jacob's college friend. I hadn't seen him since they left for university 2 years ago. He stood there in the rain with a grocery bag in one hand and flowers in the other. I opened the door without saying a word. His smile was soft, hesitant. "Hi, Mrs. Taylor. I was just in town and thought I'd check on you. Jacob's been worried." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. But in that moment, for the first time in weeks, the silence broke. Daniel stepped inside carefully, as if worried he might disturb something sacred. He handed me the flowers and groceries, his eyes scanning the room. I mumbled a thank you and gestured toward the kitchen. He followed without hesitation, unpacking the small bag: bread, tea, apples, and a jar of honey. "Jacob said you like this kind," he said, holding up the jar. I nodded, unsure what to say. His presence was unexpected but oddly comforting. He moved around the kitchen like someone familiar, asking gently if I'd eaten that day. I hadn't. He didn't scold or question it, just made tea, sliced the apples, and placed everything neatly on a plate. We sat at the table and for a while we ate in silence. I watched him, surprised at how grown he looked now. Broader shoulders, calmer energy. I remembered him as a boy who laughed too loudly and always asked for second helpings. Now he was calm, patient. Different. He spoke first. "Jacob's worried. He said you haven't been picking up." I looked down, embarrassed. I just couldn't talk. I didn't know what to say. He nodded as if he understood more than he should. "That's okay. I just thought maybe you shouldn't be alone too much." I blinked quickly, pushing away the heat rising behind my eyes. I didn't want to cry in front of him. He changed the subject, telling me about classes, about how he and Jacob were both struggling with an ethics exam. I laughed, a small sound unfamiliar in my own throat. He told me how he used to love coming to our house. "Your home always felt warm," he said, sipping his tea. "Even when it was chaotic. It felt like a real family." I felt something shift inside me, not dramatic but noticeable. He wasn't here out of obligation. He cared in a quiet, steady way. He asked about my husband, about how we met. I told him the story in pieces, not quite able to speak it all. So he listened like it mattered. Before leaving, he offered to fix the hallway light that had been flickering for weeks. I watched him on the step ladder, sleeves rolled up, focused and kind. He tested the switch and smiled when the bulb glowed steady. "There we go." At the door he paused. "I don't want to intrude or make things awkward. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to stop by now and then. Just to check in." I hesitated, not because I didn't want him to, but because I didn't trust myself to admit that I did. I nodded. That would be nice. He smiled, genuine and warm, then walked out into the rain. I closed the door and stood still for a long moment. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. I sat back down, tea still warm in my hand, and for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel completely alone. Daniel started coming by once or twice a week. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes just himself. We never made plans. He'd knock and I'd open the door. There was no need for explanations. We'd share tea, talk about his classes, sometimes sit in silence. The silences were different now, no longer heavy but restful. I started looking forward to those visits. I'd tidy up the living room, change into something presentable, even put on a little lipstick once. I told myself it was just out of politeness, not vanity. Still, it mattered to me how I looked when he saw me. He helped with things I hadn't had the energy to face. Fixing the leaky tap, changing out filters, clearing out the fridge. He never made me feel weak for needing help. He treated me with quiet respect, never overstepping, never making me feel like a burden. We began to talk more. About books, films, memories from our separate lives. I told him about a trip my husband and I once took to Paris, how we got lost and ended up finding the best bakery by accident. He smiled, asked what kind of pastries we ate. I remembered the taste more vividly than I had in years. He told me about his mother, how she passed when he was 10. He said being in my kitchen reminded him of her, though he barely remembered her face. It wasn't a comparison. It was a memory he trusted me with. One afternoon I broke down. I didn't plan to. I was cutting vegetables and the knife slipped. Not badly, just enough to sting. The pain was sharp and quick, but it cracked something deeper open. I dropped the knife, leaned on the counter and cried. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside me, hand resting gently on my shoulder. After a while he spoke, soft and calm. You don't have to hide it. Not with me. That was the moment I realized I'd let him in more than I intended. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. His presence had become a kind of comfort, and that scared me. There was a night we made pasta together. He insisted on learning how I did it from scratch. Flour ended up on the floor, on his shirt, on my cheek. He laughed and reached out to brush it off, then hesitated. His fingers hovered near my skin, and for a brief second we just looked at each other. No one moved. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. I turned away, pretending to check the water. We didn't talk about it, but we both felt it. Something unspoken was growing, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. I wrote in my journal later that night, "There's something shifting. I don't know what it means, but it doesn't feel wrong. It feels human." Daniel had become part of my routine, but more than that, he'd become part of my healing. And I didn't know what scared me more, how natural it felt or how much I wanted him to come back again. I stopped answering the door for a week. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I did. Too much. The comfort I found in him had begun to stir something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face. I told myself it was inappropriate, irrational, a product of grief. I convinced myself that if I distanced myself now, it would hurt less later. He didn't push. He left a note in the mailbox. "Hope you're okay. I'll stop by next week unless you'd rather I didn't." The note was simple, but it sat on my kitchen counter for days, untouched, like it might vanish if I didn't acknowledge it. When he finally returned, I opened the door before he even knocked. He stood there quietly, watching me with calm eyes. "I thought maybe I upset you," he said. "You didn't," I replied. "I upset myself." I asked him in. We didn't talk much at first. He sat on the couch while I folded laundry beside him. The silence held something honest. Eventually I told him the truth. That I felt things I didn't know how to name. That I was ashamed of wanting comfort, affection, something new, even when the past still lingered in every room. He listened without interruption, without judgment. "You're allowed to feel more than one thing at a time," he said. "Loss doesn't cancel out life." That night I didn't feel weak. I felt seen. Still, I kept my distance, not from him but from the idea that something might actually grow between us. It wasn't until the day I slipped in the garden, mud slick beneath my foot, a hard landing on my side, that it all came into sharp focus. I called him instinctively, not even thinking. He arrived in 15 minutes, breathless, worried, scolding me gently as he helped me inside. He stayed the rest of the evening, making sure I was okay, cooking dinner, sitting close but not too close. When I finally looked at him, really looked at him, I saw someone who had shown up again and again without asking for anything in return. Someone who filled the silence not out of pity but out of care. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said quietly. "Whatever this is, it doesn't have to be defined today. I just want you to know you're not alone." I reached for his hand. For the first time I didn't pull away. I didn't feel guilty. I felt warm. Weeks passed. The visits continued. The connection grew slow and unforced. We never rushed it. I didn't introduce him to anyone as anything. But one evening, Jacob came home for a weekend visit. He saw Daniel helping in the kitchen and raised an eyebrow. "He's around a lot, huh?" he said with a grin. I just smiled. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, not yet. I had survived loss. And somewhere in that darkness, life had handed me a thread of light. I didn't fall in love again all at once. I opened a door. I let someone in. And in doing so I remembered that my heart still knew how to beat.